The first sign of humanity's arrival came not with a roar, but a whisper, a barely perceptible signal from the fringes of the galaxy. It was not the grand announcement of an empire rising, nor a bold declaration of war. Instead, it was a faint pulse, the echo of humanity's leap into the unknown. The signal wasn't anything spectacular by the standards of the Galactic Council, but it was enough to catch their attention. The Galactic Council had seen many species come and go, some of them with grand gestures, others with terrifying force, but none of them had been as elusive, as puzzling, as the humans. It had been decades since Earth's first venture into space, a small solitary probe launched with the dream of reaching beyond their home. From that moment, humanity's thirst for exploration grew exponentially. The Council had watched this primitive species with interest, wondering how long it would take them to step into the galactic community. But the humans had surprised them. They had reached beyond their solar system faster than anticipated, and now, their ships, sleek though far from the refined design of the Council's vessels, were approaching the capital of the galaxy, an event the Council had never foreseen. The Council's capital was a magnificent, sprawling city located on a planet at the center of galactic power. It was a place of harmony, where the representatives of hundreds of species gathered in peaceful coexistence. The city itself was an architectural marvel, built not with concrete or metal, but with materials that were biologically alive, shimmering with radiant energy. Floating platforms hovered above enormous pools of liquid that connected different levels of the city, where different species interacted in an intricate dance of diplomacy. When the humans arrived, the Council convened an emergency session. They had never received an uninvited fleet before. This was unprecedented. The ships did not appear to be armed in any traditional sense, nor did they display any signs of aggression. The fleet, though not massive by the standards of the Council, was determined, each ship following the other in perfect formation. It was a curiosity. Were they explorers or conquerors? The Council members exchanged cautious glances. No one knew what to make of the humans, or how they would react. The Arcti, a race of towering predators known for their fierce demeanor, were the first to speak. Their leader, a massive being covered in dark scales, called for the session to begin. "We cannot allow this primitive species to disrupt the delicate balance of power we've established," he growled, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "What if their arrival signals the beginning of a new threat?" But the Tizern, an insectoid species known for their intelligence and deep telepathic abilities, countered with a different view. "We cannot judge them solely by their origins. The humans have evolved quickly. Their capacity for change is unlike any species I've encountered," said the Tizern representative. His voice was calm, and though his appearance was unsettling to some, his wisdom was undeniable. The debate grew heated as each species voiced their concerns, their curiosity, and their fears. Meanwhile, the human ships drew closer to the capital planet, their engines humming steadily as they navigated the vast distances. The Council had no answer. They could not simply reject the humans, nor could they welcome them blindly. No one was prepared for the inevitable meeting that would follow. No one was prepared for the moment when the human fleet would arrive at the very heart of the galaxy, at the doorstep of the most powerful and ancient alliance of sentient beings in the universe. It was a moment that would change the future forever, a moment that no one could have predicted, not even the most far-sighted members of the Galactic Council. The Galactic Council chamber, an awe-inspiring space of towering crystalline walls and ambient light, was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Each species, with their own unique forms of existence and methods of communication, had gathered to address the sudden, unexpected presence of humanity. The Vorvik, The crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic resonance emitted a soft hum as they spoke in their flowing language, their translucent bodies vibrating gently in the air. The Arcti, with their predatory stance and sharp senses, towered at the far end of the chamber, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of suspicion and wariness. The Zern, their insectoid bodies perched elegantly on their 6 legs, made little noise but radiated a tense energy. The Sarnex, humanoid in form but far more peaceful, stood in quiet contemplation, their faces reflecting a rare moment of uncertainty. It was the Sarnex representative delegate Talara who first broke the silence. Her voice, though calm and soothing, carried an undertone of concern. We must remember that humanity has arrived not with weapons, but with a signal, one that indicates a desire for knowledge, not conquest. Her words were met with an uneasy murmur from the assembly, but even they could not ignore the uncertainty that now gripped the room. The Arcti leader Rorkoth growled deeply, the sound reverberating through the chamber. You speak of knowledge, but what do we truly know about these humans? Their history is filled with violence, war, and division. Their planet is one of constant conflict. Can we trust them to join our council without threatening the stability we have worked so hard to achieve? The Vorak delegate, Laris, responded with a harmonic hum that resonated through the air. But do we not all come from histories of conflict? Even we, the Vorak, have seen violent upheaval in our past. It is not the past that defines a species, but their capacity for growth and transformation. The gentle hums of the Vorak conveyed a sense of understanding and patience, though their wisdom was often misinterpreted by those unfamiliar with their ways. The Tsern, always focused on intellect and the larger picture, sent a telepathic message to the assembly. The humans are unpredictable, but there is something within them that none of us possess, an insatiable drive to explore, to adapt, to change. It is not simply a desire to survive. It is a desire to understand. They may yet bring something unique to our collective knowledge. Despite these arguments, the atmosphere in the council chamber remained tense. The representatives were divided, some believing that humanity's presence would offer new opportunities for collaboration, while others feared the consequences of introducing such an unpredictable species into the fold. The debate raged on, and the more the members discussed, the more they realized they knew next to nothing about humanity. Their communications had been brief and fragmented, mostly consisting of vague signals and observations. Humanity had never been part of any larger interstellar alliance, nor had they been involved in any known galactic conflict. They were, in a sense, an enigma, a species whose drive to explore the stars had placed them on the cusp of something far greater than themselves. As the discussion deepened, there was a growing realization that, unlike other species, humanity was not bound by ancient traditions or the weight of millennia of history. Their journey through the stars had only just begun, and their future was theirs to shape. This notion sent ripples through the council members, who had all at some point been bound by the expectations of their civilization's past. Yet it was clear that no matter how the council tried to rationalize it, humanity's arrival would not be a simple matter of assimilation. It would be an unprecedented experiment. The question was no longer whether they could allow humanity into the fold, but whether humanity would change the very fabric of the council itself. No one could say for certain, but all knew that the outcome could alter the course of the galaxy forever. With no clear resolution yet, the council adjourned for the day, but as the delegates left the chamber, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on their minds. The future of the galaxy, and perhaps the survival of the delicate peace they had cultivated, rested in the hands of the humans who had just arrived. No one could predict what would happen next, but one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The human delegation's journey to the Galactic Council capital was a moment of both awe and trepidation for those aboard the Pioneer, the flagship of the human fleet. Captain Mara O'Connor stood at the bridge, gazing out into the abyss of space as the shimmering planet of the Council grew ever closer. The view from the bridge, vast and incomprehensible in its scale, was both humbling and terrifying. It wasn't just the scale of the galaxy she found daunting. It was the realization that humanity's first steps into this vast, alien community would shape their future in ways they couldn't yet understand. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Silva, breaking her reverie. "We've received confirmation that the Council has authorized us to send a delegation. They want to meet face to face." O'Connor turned toward him. Silva's face was tense, but beneath his calm demeanor she could see the excitement and fear mirrored in his eyes. "Have they given us any conditions?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Council had made no demands or threats, only an invitation, but the weight of that invitation was far from lost on her. "Not yet," Silva replied. "They simply want us to come. It's a test. Of that, I'm sure." "Yes." O'Connor nodded, her heart pounding. She had heard the stories of other species' first encounters with the Galactic Council. For some, it had ended in peace and integration. For others, it had led to annihilation or exile. The Council was known for its unforgiving standards. The fate of humanity was about to be decided in ways they could not control. "Prepare the delegation," she ordered. "We leave immediately." In the days leading up to their arrival at the capital, the crew of the Pioneer had been busy with preparations. Meetings were held, strategies were devised, and humanity's first diplomatic team was assembled. The group was diverse, made up of scientists, diplomats, military officers, and explorers, each hand-picked for their experience and adaptability. O'Connor knew that it would take more than technical skill or military might to navigate this meeting. It would require an understanding of diplomacy, a deep sense of self-awareness, and, most importantly, the ability to remain calm in the face of an unknown future. As the fleet entered the orbit of the Council's capital, the human delegation gathered in a large, starkly designed meeting room aboard the Pioneer. The room was simple, decorated only with the insignia of the United Earth Fleet, yet it felt like a ceremonial chamber as the team prepared to leave for the Council's capital. O'Connor adjusted her uniform, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She had been trained for situations like this. First contacts, tense negotiations, high-stakes diplomacy. But nothing could prepare her for this. The species she was about to meet were as ancient as the stars themselves. They were beings who had shaped the very fabric of the galaxy. And now, humanity was about to walk into their midst, asking for a place at their table. "Are we ready, Captain?" asked Dr. Jensen, the lead scientist on the delegation. She looked nervous, but her voice was steady. "As ready as we'll ever be," O'Connor replied, though she, too, felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. The human delegation boarded a transport shuttle, and as they made their descent toward the capital planet, the enormity of the task ahead became more tangible. Below them, the capital city of the Council stretched out in breathtaking beauty, a place of glowing bioluminescence and awe-inspiring architecture. The city was alive in a way that seemed foreign to the humans, a fusion of organic growth and technological advancement that defied their understanding of engineering. As the shuttle landed, the human delegation filed out, a group of individuals who had once been strangers to the stars, but were now standing at the very threshold of galactic history. O'Connor was the first to step out onto the platform, her boots touching the ground of an alien world for the first time. She could feel the pulse of the planet beneath her feet, the thrumming energy of the city that was older than human civilization itself. They were met by an honor guard, a strange, silent assembly of various species, each looking at them with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The humans had no idea what to expect, but the silence was unsettling. It was as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to happen. O'Connor straightened her posture and took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's future. It was no longer a matter of what they would say or do. It was a question of whether they could prove themselves worthy of a place in the galaxy. There was no turning back now. The Grand Council chamber was unlike anything the human delegation had ever seen. The room seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, its walls made of living, semi-translucent material that pulsed with a soft, radiant light. In the center, an enormous pool of liquid shimmered, its surface undulating with an energy that gave the impression of being alive, even though the humans knew it was not. Floating platforms, each a different size and shape, hovered silently above the pool, some holding representatives from the various species of the Galactic Council. The room was quiet, eerily quiet, as the humans stepped forward. Captain O'Connor led her delegation into the center of the room, her heart beating faster with each step. There were no formal greetings, no handshakes or traditional gestures of diplomacy. The silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the subtle hums and vibrations emitted by the crystalline representatives of the Vorak. It was a tense, palpable silence, as if every being in the room was waiting to see what these strange newcomers would do. The human delegation stood in a semicircle, their eyes scanning the chamber, taking in the forms of the various species that populated the council. There were the towering arctai, with their heavily muscled bodies and predator-like stances, their dark reptilian skin shimmering in the soft light. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, studied the humans closely, their posture rigid with suspicion. The Sarn, who resembled large insectoid beings with exoskeletons that reflected the light in strange iridescent patterns, observed the humans with what appeared to be mild interest. The Sarnex, humanoid in shape but with delicate features and long flowing robes, were the only ones who showed any sign of warmth, their expressions not hostile but curious. Captain O'Connor stood tall, her posture firm, though she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had faced moments of extreme pressure before, political negotiations, military standoffs, and even moments of intense personal loss. But nothing in her career had prepared her for this. The fate of humanity, her people, was now in the hands of these ancient and powerful species. She could not afford to falter, not now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Arcti leader, Roard Koth, broke the silence with a guttural growl. His voice boomed across the chamber, carrying an unmistakable authority that sent a ripple of tension through the humans. You come from a violent world, human. A world torn apart by war, by conflict. Tell us, what is it you seek here? Are you truly here to learn, or do you seek to dominate? Rorkoth's words were harsh, his gaze never leaving O'Connor. The humans exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond to the accusation. O'Connor's voice was steady as she took a step forward, her eyes meeting Rorkoth's, unflinching. We seek knowledge, unity, and a future where our people can contribute to the galaxy. We are aware of our past, and we are working to overcome it. We have learned much from the mistakes we made, and we come to you not as conquerors, but as seekers, seeking understanding and peace. The chamber fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over the room. It was a truth that none of the species in the council had expected. Most had assumed that humanity would come with demands, or with the arrogance of those who had not yet faced the trials of the galaxy. But instead, here they were, acknowledging their flaws openly and asking for a chance to change. The Sarnex representative, Delegate Tilara, the most peaceful of the council members, spoke next. Her voice was calm and gentle, though it carried the wisdom of centuries. You speak of peace, human. But the galaxy is not so simple. You must prove that your species is capable of coexisting with others. Your planet is a place of chaos, and the scars of your past still run deep. It is not enough to ask for peace. You must demonstrate it. O'Connor nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. We understand, Delegate. We have come to learn from those who have walked this path before us. We offer no guarantees, but we offer our word that we will do everything we can to contribute. We wish only to grow. Slowly our carriages retreated. The room remained quiet for a long moment, each species processing O'Connor's words in their own way. The ARC-T leader, his sharp eyes narrowing, exchanged a look with the CERN representative. The Vorak resonated softly, their harmonics adding to the quiet murmur that filled the room. Despite the tension, it was clear that the humans had made a strong impression. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Larius, the Vorak representative, spoke in a low melodic voice that seemed to reverberate through the chamber. Perhaps there is more to humanity than we have understood. Perhaps there is a chance for you to prove yourselves. A long silence followed, the council members exchanging looks and silent communications. O'Connor could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for the verdict. The future of humanity rested on the decision of these ancient beings, and for the first time in her life, she felt as if the entire universe were watching her. Rokoth finally spoke again, his voice heavy with deliberation. We will not make any immediate decisions. Your species will undergo a series of trials, tests that will determine if you are truly worthy of joining the Galactic Council. These trials will not be easy, and they will not be kind. You will be tested in ways you cannot yet comprehend. O'Connor's breath caught in her throat. She had expected some form of testing, but the weight of the trials to come was daunting. Still, she stood tall, her resolve unwavering. We accept, she said, her voice firm. We will prove ourselves. The decision had been made, and humanity's future in the galaxy was now in their hands. The trials would begin soon, and they would determine not only their place in the galaxy, but the very survival of their people among the stars. The following days were a blur of preparation and uncertainty. The human delegation was given a temporary quarters within the heart of the council's capital, a towering spire of living stone that seemed to pulse with energy. The structure itself was alive, its walls breathing as if the planet itself were conscious. It was an unsettling feeling for the humans, whose cities were made of cold stone and steel, not organic matter. Despite the comforts of the living quarters, O'Connor and her team found it difficult to relax, knowing the trials would soon begin. The trials were spoken of only in vague terms. No one, not even the most seasoned diplomats, knew exactly what to expect. The council had not been forthcoming with details. What had been made clear, however, was that these trials would test every aspect of humanity, their resolve, their intellect, their morality, and most of all, their capacity for cooperation. The stakes were high. The council's members had made it clear. Failure was not an option. Captain O'Connor stood on the observation deck of the spire, gazing out at the city below. The vast cityscape stretched for miles, a web of lights and structures suspended in the air. It was beautiful, but in a way that felt alien. This was the domain of beings who had transcended the physical limits of their existence. The human fleet, their ships still docked in orbit, looked small and out of place in comparison to the towering structures of the Council. She had a deep, gnawing feeling in her gut. The humans were stepping into a world that might not have room for them. The possibility of failure loomed large in her mind. She was interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find Dr. Jensen, the lead scientist of the delegation, approaching. His face was lined with concern, but his expression was determined. "Captain," Jensen began, his voice steady but tinged with unease, "I've been reviewing the records. The last time a species attempted to join the Galactic Council, it didn't end well. They failed the trials and were cast out. It was a massacre. The Arcti were particularly unforgiving." Connor met his gaze, her face calm, though her mind raced. "I know, Doctor, but we aren't those species. We've learned from our mistakes, and we will prove that we belong here. We have to." Jensen hesitated, then nodded. "You're right. It's just, we don't know what to expect, and the Council doesn't seem interested in providing answers. They've given us no guidelines, no framework. We're expected to just perform." The uncertainty was a weight that everyone felt, but O'Connor knew that now was not the time for doubt. "We've faced the unknown before. We've always found a way forward. We'll do it again. But we need to stay focused. We need to remember who we are." Jensen nodded again, though his expression remained tense. "I'll continue to prepare the team. But Captain, we're not just representing ourselves. We're representing every human being, every person who's ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of a future among them." Tawana placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression resolute. "We won't let them down." The days leading up to the trials felt endless. Every member of the delegation trained in various aspects of galactic culture, diplomacy, and strategy. They were briefed on the history of the Council, the different species they might encounter, and the possible scenarios they would face. But despite all their preparation, there was one thing that no amount of training could prepare them for: the unknown. On the morning of the first trial, the humans were summoned to the Council chamber once more. This time, the chamber was different. The once immense room had been rearranged, with various sections divided into smaller, specialized areas. The atmosphere was tense as the humans entered, their faces a mixture of determination and apprehension. The Council members were already assembled, each species represented in their usual form: silent, watchful, their eyes glowing with intelligence and power. Without preamble, a voice echoed through the chamber, both mechanical and organic, vibrating in the air. "The first trial will test your ability to adapt and collaborate. You will be placed in a situation where survival is at stake. You will be forced to work together, not just as individuals, but as a united group. Fail, and you will fail alone." The word struck O'Connor like a physical blow. The trial was not about intellect, nor was it about showcasing individual strengths. It was about cooperation. This was their first real test: whether humanity, fractured and divided by its own history, could come together in the face of an unknown challenge. A series of floating platforms appeared in the center of the room, their surfaces gleaming with an unknown energy. The humans were directed to board the platforms and, with a gentle hum, they were lifted into the air, the chamber walls fading away as they were transported to a new environment. Below them, an alien landscape sprawled, a harsh and unfamiliar terrain. The trial had begun. The environment they found themselves in was a stark contrast to the beauty of the capital. It was a barren landscape of jagged rock formations and harsh winds. The ground was cracked, and a sense of danger hung in the air. The humans looked around, instinctively reaching for their equipment, only to realize that they were completely unprepared for this new environment. They were completely alone, without any assistance, their survival in the hands of their ability to adapt and work together. O'Connor's mind raced. She had expected something difficult, but not this. They were stranded in an alien world with no resources, no supplies. The only thing they had was each other. It was a challenge unlike anything they had faced before, and it would be the first of many. The landscape was unforgiving, a rocky expanse that seemed to stretch on endlessly, its jagged formations rising like the bones of some long-forgotten giant. The air was thin, and the winds whipped across the barren terrain with a force that made every movement feel like an effort. The humans, still processing the shock of being thrust into this hostile environment, stood together in a loose formation, their faces marked with uncertainty but also determination. Captain O'Connor's mind was racing. They had no supplies, no way of knowing what dangers this alien world held. The temperature was dropping quickly, the thin atmosphere making it harder to breathe. The trial had begun, and already she could feel the weight of the stakes pressing down on them. They had to prove that they could cooperate, not just with each other, but with the unknown. "Stay close," O'Connor ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. "We don't know what's out there, but we'll figure it out. Together." Dr. Jensen, the lead scientist, moved to her side. "We'll need to find shelter, Captain. If we don't protect ourselves from the cold, we won't survive the night." "I agree," O'Connor replied, scanning the surroundings. The sun, if it was indeed the sun, was setting low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. The team was already exhausted, their bodies not accustomed to the harsh conditions. But there was no time for doubt. They had to move. The crew members, though weary, began working in unison. Lieutenant Silva, with his military background, took charge of organizing the group's movements, assigning roles to each member. "We need to make sure we're not exposed. Everyone, search for any natural formations that can provide shelter." The team spread out, each member scanning the area with a combination of military precision and scientific curiosity. They had no tools, no equipment, not even basic survival gear. But they had their wits, their resourcefulness, and their ability to adapt. Each person understood that their individual survival was secondary to the survival of the team. As they searched, O'Connor's mind remained focused. She knew the trial was about more than just finding shelter. It was about trust, about each person being willing to put aside their differences and work toward a common goal. It was a test of what humanity could become, of whether they could come together as a species, despite their fractured history, to face the challenges that lay ahead. It wasn't long before Dr. Jensen called out to the group, "Over here, I found something." The team converged on him and they saw what he had discovered. A small cave, its entrance hidden behind a large boulder. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It would provide them some protection from the wind and the cold. They wasted no time in hauling the boulder away and moving inside, grateful for any semblance of safety. As they settled inside the cave, there was a brief moment of relief. They were safe. For now. But the team was under no illusion that this was the end of the trial. It had only just begun. O'Connor looked around at her team, each person exhausted but resolute. "This isn't over. We've found shelter, but we need to be prepared for whatever comes next. This environment is harsh, and it won't give us mercy. We need to work together, or none of us will make it." Lieutenant Silva nodded, his expression hardening. "Understood, Captain. But we also need to make sure we're not just surviving. We need to start learning about this place. If we're going to prove ourselves, we can't just wait for the trial to end. We need to show them that we're capable of more. O'Connor thought for a moment. Silva was right. This trial was not just about surviving. It was about demonstrating their ability to adapt, to learn, and to collaborate in the face of adversity. They weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. The cave was small, but it offered them some respite from the harsh winds. They set up a rudimentary camp, huddling together for warmth. There was no fire, no warmth beyond the cold, unfeeling stone of their shelter. The silence of the alien world pressed in on them, the only sound the occasional gust of wind rattling the rocks outside. As night fell, the humans sat together, the weight of the trial settling in. They had no answers, no way of knowing what challenges lay ahead. But they had each other, and that, at least, was something. In the darkness, Captain O'Connor's thoughts turned inward. She knew the trials were just beginning. This was only the first test, but it would determine everything. How would humanity perform under pressure? Could they learn to cooperate in a world where every instinct told them to survive alone? She could feel the eyes of the galaxy upon them, watching, judging. She had always believed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its individual prowess, but in its ability to come together, to overcome differences and build something greater than the sum of its parts. This was their chance to prove that, not just to the Council, but to themselves. As the wind howled outside, O'Connor closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The trial would test them in ways they couldn't anticipate, but she was determined. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They would do so again. They had no choice but to succeed. The next day arrived with the harsh brightness of an alien sun filtering through the cracks in the cave. Despite the disorienting chill of the morning, the humans were already up, moving swiftly and quietly. The events of the previous day weighed heavily on them, but they knew there was no time to dwell on fatigue. They had to keep moving forward, pushing through whatever obstacles lay ahead. They had made it through the first night, but they could not afford to let their guard down. Captain O'Connor stood outside the cave, her eyes scanning the horizon. The alien landscape remained as unyielding as it had been the day before, barren and desolate, with nothing but rocks and windswept plains in every direction. There was no sign of life, no indication of what might be waiting for them. All they had was each other, and the promise they had made to themselves. They would survive, and they would prove themselves worthy of a place among the stars. "Captain, we need to move." Lieutenant Silva's voice broke through her thoughts. He stepped up beside her, his face etched with the same resolve that had defined the crew since the moment they arrived. "We've scouted the area. There's a ridge up ahead. It might give us a better vantage point, help us see what's coming." O'Connor nodded. "Agreed. Let's get moving. No time to waste." The team began to gather their things, readying themselves for the next phase of the trial. They had no supplies beyond what they could carry in their packs, essential tools, a few rations, and their determination to succeed. As they made their way toward the ridge, the landscape grew even more hostile. The wind picked up, howling and sharp, and the ground became more uneven, filled with treacherous rocks and deep cracks. It was a constant reminder of how precarious their situation was. The further they traveled, the more their bodies began to protest. Their muscles ached, their breaths came in ragged gasps, and yet they pressed on. Each step forward was a battle against both the environment and the creeping sense of doubt that lingered in the back of their minds. They had to keep going. They had to prove that humanity could endure in a way that no other species had ever imagined. When they reached the ridge, they finally stopped, taking a moment to catch their breath. From their elevated position, they could see further than they had before. The barren land stretched out below them, seemingly endless. But in the distance, something caught their eye. A series of small, shifting shapes moving quickly, like animals darting across the plains. At first, they couldn't tell what they were, but then the realization hit. These were creatures, living, breathing beings, and they were coming closer. The team quickly crouched low, instinctively seeking cover. O'Connor's heart rate spiked as the shapes neared, their movements swift and unpredictable. It was difficult to tell whether they were hostile or not, but the last thing they wanted was to make a wrong move. The trial had already tested them physically, but now it seemed to be testing their judgment, their ability to assess threats and respond with caution. "Stay alert," O'Connor whispered, her voice low but commanding. "We don't know what they are or if they're dangerous." As the creatures approached, the humans tensed, ready to act if necessary. The shapes in the distance became clearer. They were not like any animals the humans had encountered before. Sleek and fast, with elongated limbs and smooth, reflective skin that shimmered in the harsh sunlight. They moved with a precision that suggested intelligence. The creatures paused at the edge of the ridge, seemingly aware of the humans' presence. For a moment, the two groups just stared at each other, locked in a silent standoff. The creatures made no sound, their large, reflective eyes watching the humans with an intensity that was almost unnerving. O'Connor held her breath, the weight of the situation settling over her. The trial had shifted from one of physical survival to one of social intelligence. How would they approach this? The last thing they needed was a violent confrontation. Without warning, one of the creatures stepped forward, its movements smooth and purposeful. It raised one of its limbs in a gesture that, while foreign, seemed to suggest peaceful intent. O'Connor's mind raced, trying to understand the unspoken message. Should they react? Should they mimic the gesture? Would it be perceived as an act of aggression? Dr. Jensen stepped forward cautiously, his scientific curiosity getting the better of him. He raised his hand, trying to mirror the creature's motion. Slowly, the creature's other limb reached out, almost as if acknowledging the gesture. There was no immediate attack, no sign of danger. O'Connor watched in astonishment, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this it? Had they just made their first contact with an alien species? The reality of the moment was surreal, yet at the same time, it felt as if they were on the precipice of something monumental. They weren't just surviving this harsh world, they were engaging with it. They were showing the Council that humanity could adapt, that they could navigate the unknown with curiosity and intelligence. The creature continued to watch them for a few more moments. Then, with a fluid movement, it turned and bounded off into the distance. The rest of its kind followed suit, disappearing into the horizon as quickly as they had appeared. O'Connor exhaled sharply, her body relaxing as the immediate threat passed. But the trial was far from over. They had learned something valuable. But this was only the beginning. "We did it," Silva said quietly as the team began to regroup. "We made it through." O'Connor nodded, but her mind remained sharp. They had made it through this part of the trial, yes. But the ultimate test, the one that would decide whether humanity would earn its place in the galaxy, was still ahead. They had proven they could survive. Now, they had to prove they could thrive, not just as individuals, but as a species capable of contributing to the greater whole of the galaxy. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since landing, O'Connor allowed herself a small breath of hope.